Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world one book at a time.
Today we are staring down a paradox that I think keeps a lot of us up at night. I want you to take a second and just look around you. Consider where we are right now. You and I are sitting in a climate-controlled room, recording on digital equipment that relies on, literally quantum mechanics to function. You likely have a device in your pocket, a smartphone, that connects you to the sum total of human knowledge in milliseconds.
We are, by any objective metric, living in the absolute peak of scientific achievement. It's not even close.
Exactly.
Yep.
By every measurable metric, infant mortality, life expectancy, food production, global communication science has delivered the goods. We have the tools right now to effectively feed every hungry person on the planet.
Yeah.
We have the technology to cure diseases that used to liquidate entire civilizations. And yet,
we are seeing this massive systemic rejection of the very method that got us here.
Right?
It feels like the ground is shifting under our feet.
That is the crisis. We aren't just seeing skepticism. Skepticism is healthy. Science demands skepticism. What we are seeing is denialism.
Right.
We were seeing a retreat into what Michael Specter, the author we're discussing today, calls magical thinking. And the core systemic question we are trying to answer today isn't, why are people stupid? Because they're not.
Right, that's the lazy answer.
Yeah.
It's way too easy to just dismiss it as ignorance.
The real question is this. Why is the human brain, which evolved to spot a lion in the grass on the savannah, failing so spectacularly to process the risks of the modern world? Why do we fear the GMO corn that could save a starving nation, but we sort of ignore the slow-motion car crash of disregarding climate change? Why do we have the tools to save lives, but an increasing number of people are just refusing to pick them up?
And this isn't just about internet arguments or Twitter threads, right? I think people hear anti-science and they think of flat earthers or some niche conspiracy theorists.
No, not at all. The stakes here are existential. This denialism, it impacts public health. We see it so clearly in vaccine refusal. It shapes environmental policy. It threatens global food security.
And trust.
And perhaps most dangerously, it dismantles the trust we need to keep civilization running. We're talking about everything from the return of measles in wealthy suburbs to the starvation of populations in Africa because of ideology.
So our roadmap for today involves a deep dive into the systems and structures of denialism. And I want to issue a quick disclaimer before we really jump in here.
Please.
We are not here to mock individuals. If you're scared of GMOs or if you felt hesitant about a medical treatment, this isn't about pointing a finger and saying, you're wrong.
Right. It's about understanding the system that generates that fear, monetizes it, and makes it very, very difficult for you to see the forest for the trees. We want to look at the mechanics of the machine that manufactures doubt.
Our guide for this journey is the book, Denialism. How Irrational Thinking Hinders Scientific Progress, Harms the Planet, and Threatens Our Lives by Michael Specter.
And Specter is a veteran science journalist. He's written for The New Yorker and The New York Times for decades, focusing heavily on public health, on pandemics. And he wrote this book because he witnessed a profound shift during his career. He saw us move from an era of, optimism, where the default assumption was science will save us, to an era of dread, where the assumption became science will kill us.
There is a story he tells early in the book that I think just frames this shift perfectly, and it challenges a lot of our assumptions about who exactly is anti-science. It's the Harvard Yard anecdote.
It is. It's such a perfect little scene. So Specter is walking through Harvard Yard, the absolute cradle of American academia, right? And he bumps into a student who is handing out flyers. The student is wearing a button.
And the button says, Progressives Against Scientism.
Right. Now, Specter stops him. He's a reporter. He's curious. He asks, what exactly are you against? What is scientism?
And this is the pivot point, because usually when we think anti-science, we picture a very specific stereotype, don't we?
Yeah, maybe a religious fundamentalist denying evolution or a right-wing climate denier. But this student was a liberal, a progressive, and he proceeded to list off his grievances. Genetically modified food, vaccines, dams, the medical-industrial complex.
So to him, science wasn't the solution to human suffering.
It was the problem. He believed that scientists were trespassing on nature, that the scientific method itself was a tool of destruction. And Specter realized in that moment that for a large swath of the population, particularly the educated, wealthy left, progress had become a dirty word.
And conversely, natural had become a synonym for moral.
Precisely. If it's natural, it's good. If it's engineered, it's bad. Specter argues this is a hangover from the post-Cold War landscape. Think about it. For 50 years, what was the biggest threat to humanity?
Nuclear annihilation. Physics. The bomb.
An external threat created by scientists.
Ah.
But when the Berlin Wall fell, that fear didn't just disappear. It sublimated. It turned inward. We stopped fearing the bomb dropping on us, and we started fearing what we put in our bodies. We started fearing the invisible threats, the pesticide residues on our grapes, the preservatives in our vaccines, the DNA in our corn.
And this leads us to the central thesis of the book. We need to define denialism explicitly here, because it's distinct from skepticism, and it's certainly distinct from ignorance.
It's a crucial distinction. Ignorance is just a lack of data. Ignorance is curable. You teach someone and they learn. Denialism is active. It is the active refusal to accept reality when the truth is too painful, too complex, or frankly, too frightening.
So it's not show me the proof.
No. It replaces rigorous skepticism, which is show me the proof, with inflexible certainty, which is I refuse to believe the proof because it doesn't fit my story.
It's a coping mechanism.
It is absolutely a system of coping. We're traumatized by the speed of technological change. The world is moving faster than our biology can handle. We feel a loss of control. And denialism gives us that control back.
Oh, so?
It allows us to say, no, I know better than the experts. I have the secret knowledge. It simplifies a terrifyingly complex world into a story of good versus evil.
But, and here's where we have to be fair, and frankly where it gets a little dark. This loss of trust didn't happen in a vacuum, did it?
Not at all.
It wasn't just people waking up one day and deciding to hate science for no reason. There was a catalyst, a breach of trust.
Right. We have to look at the system incentives. And there is no better example of why people stopped trusting the system, why the tinfoil hat crowd actually got a big one right, than the story of Vioxx.
This is the patient zero for the modern crisis of trust. Let's unpack Vioxx, because the details here really matter. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a systemic betrayal.
It was. So in the late 90s, the pharmaceutical giant Merck released Vioxx. It was marketed as a super aspirin. It targeted a specific enzyme called COX-2. The promise was incredible. You could treat severe arthritis pain without burning a hole in your stomach, which is the major side effect of things like ibuprofen or regular aspirin.
It was a blockbuster. I mean, Merck spent millions marketing it directly to consumers.
Billions. But then they ran a study called Vigor. The goal was to prove definitively that Vioxx was easier on the stomach than naproxen, what we all know as Alev. And the study did prove that. Great news for the stomach. But there was a detail buried in the data tables.
The heart attacks.
The group taking Vioxx had significantly more cardiovascular events, heart attacks, and strokes than the group taking naproxen. Now, a responsible scientist or a responsible system looks at that and says, whoa, red flag. Our drug might be clotting the blood. We need to stop.
What did Merck do instead?
They invented a fairy tale. And I mean that literally. They didn't have data to support this, but they went to the FDA and said, no, Vioxx doesn't cause heart attacks. It's just that.
Right.
Well, naproxen protects the heart like a magic shield, and we just never knew it until now.
Wait, hold on. So they argued that the control group was super healthy because of the Alev, not that their group was dying because of the Vioxx.
Exactly. It was called the naproxen hypothesis. It was a statistical sleight of hand used to shield a billion-dollar product. They gaslit the FDA and the entire medical community, and it worked for a while.
Until someone called them on it.
Until Dr. Eric Topol, a heavy hitter in cardiology at the Cleveland Clinic, sat down with the raw data.
Topol is the hero of this story, really.
He is. He realized the math was impossible. The rate of heart attacks in the Vioxx group was just too high to be explained away. He published a paper warning about a risk, and Merck went on the attack. They tried to get him fired. They complained to the head of the clinic.
But the truth eventually came out.
It did. Vioxx is estimated to have caused between 38,000 and 55,000 deaths.
55,000 deaths. That is Vietnam War numbers.
Okay.
That is a stadium full of people.
And Merck eventually settled for billions, but they never had to formally admit liability in a way that truly held executives accountable. This is the breach. The system, the FDA, the pharmaceutical industry, is designed to protect public health, but it is incentivized by profit and speed. When those incentives clashed, profit won.
And this creates what you call the Vioxx effect. Because if you are a parent and you see a giant corporation lie about a drug that killed 55,000 people, and then a scientist comes along and says, hey, trust us, these vaccines are safe, what are you going to think?
You're going to think, you lied before, why should I trust you now? The valid conspiracy that corporations did put profit over lives provided the fuel for the invalid conspiracies. It destroyed the default assumption that approved medicine is safe.
And that leads us directly into the feedback loop of fear regarding vaccines. This is where we see that valid mistrust morph into something truly, truly dangerous.
This narrative is a masterclass in how denialism works. It starts, of course, with Andrew Wakefield. In 1998, he published a paper in The Lancet claiming a link between the MMR vaccine and autism.
And we need to be crystal clear here. This study wasn't just flawed. It was a complete fraud.
It was a hoax. The data was faked. He abused the children in the study. He had a massive financial conflict of interest. He was developing a competing vaccine he wanted to sell. The paper was retracted, and he was stripped of his medical license. But the story was perfect.
Why was the story so sticky? Why did it stick around even after being so thoroughly debunked?
Because it offered a cause for a terrifying, unexplained phenomenon. Autism is frightening to a parent because it so often appears mysteriously. You have a healthy, engaging child, and then around age 2, they start to regress. They lose language. They stop making eye contact.
And you're desperate for an answer.
Desperate. Wakefield provided a villain, the vaccine. It gave parents something to blame, something to fight.
And this brings us to the celebrity amplification. Jenny McCarthy, Jim Carrey, the Green R vaccines movement.
Notice the systemic shift in their language. This was brilliant branding. They didn't say, we are anti-vaccine. That sounds crazy, right? They said, we are pro-safe vaccine. They used slogans like, green our vaccines.
Which implies that the current vaccines are dirty or toxic. It co-opts the language of environmentalism. It's very clever.
Incredibly clever. It frames the scientific consensus as the toxic establishment and the denialist as the natural protector. They promoted the idea of too many, too soon, that kids are getting turned into pincushions. It sounds intuitive. It feels like common sense.
But immunology isn't intuitive. It's not common sense.
Not at all. Specter points out that a baby encounters more antigens crawling on the living room floor for an hour than they do in the entire childhood vaccine schedule combined. The immune system is a beast. It can handle the vaccines easily, but intuition says otherwise.
Specter brings up a concept here that I think is essential for you, the listener, to understand. It's the cognitive trap called true, true, and unrelated. Can we break that down?
This is the mechanism that breaks the human brain. Humans are pattern-seeking machines. We crave causality. So here's how it works. Fact 1. I gave my child a vaccine at 15 to 18 months. That is true.
Okay.
Fact 2. My child was diagnosed with autism symptoms at 15 to 18 months. That is also true. Those are both true facts.
And because they happen at the same time.
Our brains scream causality. If the rooster crows and the sun comes up, the primitive brain says, the rooster summoned the sun. If the needle goes in and the light leaves my child's eyes, the brain screams that the needle did it.
It feels undeniable to a parent.
It feels visceral. It feels like the truest thing in the world. But biologically, they are unrelated. Autism symptoms naturally manifest at that developmental stage regardless of vaccination. We know this because unvaccinated kids develop autism at the exact same rate and time. But try telling that to a grieving mother who needs a villain.
And the system of denialism monetizes that coincidence. It sells books, it builds movements, it sells detox supplements.
And the consequence is the loss of herd immunity. Measles returns. Whooping cough returns. We are seeing diseases that were conquered in the 1950s making a comeback because a story was more powerful than the data.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Green R vaccines slogan, because that links perfectly to the next big system Specter analyzes, the natural fallacy, the obsession with organic, pure, non-GMO food.
This is where the political spectrum bends like a horseshoe, you know? You have the anti-vaccine sentiment often on the right, distrust of government, but the anti-GMO sentiment is firmly rooted in the environmental left. And it stems from what Specter calls the organic fetish.
The idea that if it's natural, it's safe. And if it's engineered, it's evil. Frankenfood.
Frankenfood is a brilliant piece of marketing for denialism. It immediately frames the scientist as the madman violating nature. But Specter points out the irony. There is no such thing as natural food. Corn, wheat, rice humans have been genetically modifying these crops via selective breeding for 10,000 years.
Right. I've heard that wild corn is basically just a grass with a few hard kernels.
It's barely edible. We just do it faster and more precisely now. But for the consumer in a Whole Foods in California, buying organic feels like a moral act. It feels like safety. It feels like control.
For a wealthy Westerner, it is a lifestyle choice. And that's fine. If you want to pay 3 times as much for an apple because it makes you feel better, go ahead. But here is where the system becomes destructive. Specter argues that this precautionary principle, the idea that we shouldn't use a technology until it is proven 100% risk-free, is a death sentence for the developing world.
This brings us to the Zambia case study. And honestly, this is the most heartbreaking and infuriating chapter in the book. It really reveals the moral weight of these systems.
I set the scene for us. This isn't a debate in a supermarket aisle.
No, it's 2002. Zambia is facing a catastrophic famine. A drought has wiped out the harvest. People are literally eating leaves, roots, boiling poisonous nuts just to put something in their stomachs. The United States offers thousands of tons of corn to aid them.
Life-saving aid. Simple.
It should have been. But some of that corn was GM genetically modified. Standard stuff Americans had been eating for years without a single documented issue. But European NGOs and groups like Greenpeace parachuted into Zambia. They told the Zambian leadership that this corn was poison. They said it would cause cancer, sterility, or that it would contaminate their genetic heritage.
So you have well-fed Westerners flying into a famine zone to tell starving people to be picky eaters.
It's worse than that. They leveraged trade. They told Zambia, if you accept this GM corn, Europe will never import your produce again. It was economic blackmail.
And the result?
The president of Zambia, Levi Mwanawasa, believed them. He locked the food in warehouses. Specter describes these scenes: starving villagers gathering outside the fences of the silos. They could smell the corn rotting inside. They were picking up individual kernels that fell off the delivery trucks in the dirt to eat, and the soldiers had to hold them back at gunpoint.
That is, it's a form of colonial violence, isn't it, when you really break it down?
Specter calls it exactly that. It is the imposition of Western neuroses on the global poor. We have the luxury to debate organic purity. They have the urgent need to survive. Specter has a quote that just sears this into your brain. It is a cruel fantasy to think that organic farming alone can feed the global population.
Why?
Because organic farming has lower yields and requires more land. Denying high-yield technology to the developing world because it feels unnatural to a shopper in London is systematically a form of violence.
It's putting ideology over evidence. And that theme continues into the next section, which might be the most lethal example in the entire book: AIDS denialism in South Africa.
This is where we see what happens when denialism captures the state. Thabo Mbeki, the president of South Africa after Mandela, was a highly intelligent man. He wasn't a fool, but he viewed Western science through the lens of post-colonialism. He saw Western AIDS, drugs, antiretrovirals as a colonial plot. He thought they were toxic.
He didn't believe HIV caused AIDS.
He was heavily influenced by a small group of American denialist scientists who had gone rogue and claimed HIV was harmless. Mbeki argued that AIDS was caused by poverty and malnutrition, not a virus.
So instead of giving his people life-saving drugs, what was his policy? What did he do?
He and his health minister promoted garlic, lemon, beetroot, and olive oil. They told people to eat garlic to cure AIDS while refusing to distribute ARVs that were being donated or offered at low cost.
And the human cost. What was the toll?
A Harvard study estimated that between the years 2000 and 2005, Mbeki's denialism caused 365,000 preventable deaths.
Wow.
Think about that number, 365,000. That is a city wiped off the map. This proves that denialism isn't just an annoying internet trend. It is a lethal system when it interacts with power.
It's terrifying because Mbeki thought he was doing the right thing. He thought he was protecting his people from Western poison.
That is the tragedy. Denialism often mimics critical thinking. Mbeki thought he was being a skeptic. He thought he was questioning authority, but he was questioning the wrong things, and he ignored the overwhelming evidence because it conflicted with his political identity.
We've talked about drugs, food, and viruses. But there is another massive industry built on this mistrust: the alternative universe. Kanekaba, complementary and alternative medicine.
This is the rebranding of what we used to just call snake oil. But snake oil sounds bad, right? Alternative medicine sounds empowering. Integrative medicine sounds holistic.
Specter spends a lot of time on Andrew Weil, the guru of this movement.
Weil is fascinating because he is a Harvard-trained doctor. He knows the science, he understands it, but he promotes this idea of evidence of experience. He says, essentially, I've seen it work, so it works. He values the anecdote over the randomized controlled trial.
And the system supports this. I was shocked to read that we have the government actually funding this stuff.
This is the story of Senator Tom Harkin. He believed that bee pollen cured his allergies. Based on that one personal experience, an experiment of one person, he pushed to create the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, or NCCM, within the National Institutes of Health.
So taxpayer money is being used to study bee pollen.
And distant prayer and energy healing. Specter points out the massive double standard here. We demand rigorous billion-dollar safety trials for a new pharmaceutical, and we should. That's correct. But supplements, they are almost completely unregulated. You can put almost anything in a bottle, call it immune support, and sell it without proving it works or that it's safe.
It's a paradox, isn't it? We don't trust the regulated stuff, but we blindly trust the unregulated stuff because it has a picture of a leaf on the bottle.
Because the narrative is natural equals safe, and corporate equals evil. It is a simplistic binary that the alternative industry exploits to the tune of billions of dollars a year.
So let's pause and map this system out, because we promised a systems analysis, and I think we can see the gears turning now. We look at the board. Who are the actors here?
Okay, let's look at the map. First, you have the public. And they are the protagonists, really. They are traumatized by rapid change, they feel a loss of control, and they are seeking simplicity. They want agency. They want to know that if they eat the right kale, they won't get cancer.
Then you have the denialists.
These are the leaders. The RFK Juniors, the Jenny McCarthys, the Lord Melchetts of the world. They provide the narrative. They give the public a comforting story and a definitive enemy. They say, it's not bad luck, it's the toxin. It's not biology, it's Monsanto.
And the corporations.
They are the antagonists in the denialist narrative, but in reality, they are often the architects of their own demise.
Yeah.
Merck, Monsanto, they erode trust through greed or opacity. When they hide data, they validate the paranoia of the public. They give the denialists ammunition.
And finally, the media.
The amplifiers. Oprah, Larry King in his day, the algorithm of social media now. They amplify emotional anecdotes over dry data because emotion sells ads. A mother crying about her child is compelling TV. A scientist explaining a p-value is not.
And the incentives drive all the behavior.
Exactly. For the public, the incentive is identity protection and fear reduction. It feels better to blame a toxin than to accept that the universe is random and cruel.
For the industry, the incentive is profit over safety, at least in the short term.
For the denialist leaders, the incentive is fame, book sales, and the power of being a truth teller against the establishment.
And this creates the feedback loops we've been discussing this whole time.
Look at the Vioxx effect loop. Corporate malfeasance, like Vioxx, validates mistrust. That mistrust leads the public to reject all science, even the good stuff like vaccines.
Which leads to harm.
Right. Diseases return. Then scientists plead for reason, but they're labeled as shills for big pharma, which just deepens the mistrust.
And the cycle repeats. What about the other loop, the natural loop?
It's just as powerful. Fear of technology creates demand for pure products, which fuels the growth of the organic and supplement industry, whose marketing then demonizes science to sell more products, which increases the fear of technology.
It is a self-reinforcing machine. And what's scary is that as science gets more and more complex, this gap is only going to get wider. Specter talks about the present-day implications, specifically with things like synthetic biology. This is the so what for the future.
This is the frontier. We are moving from reading DNA to writing it. Specter interviews Drew Endy, a bioengineer. They are talking about creating new forms of life, biobricks, engineering bacteria to eat oil spills or to cure cancer from inside your body.
Which sounds amazing, but also terrifying. I mean, I get the fear here. I really do.
It is terrifying, and Specter admits that. It brings up the God complex fear, playing God. But the systemic risk here is massive. If we let denialism run the show, we will ban this technology. We will lose the cure for malaria or the solution to the energy crisis because we are too afraid to engage with the complexity.
Or we drive it underground.
Exactly. That is the greater danger. If legitimate scientists can't do it in regulated labs, rogue actors will do it in garages. We need a rational regulatory system, not a blanket ban based on fear. But because the public doesn't understand the science and they don't trust the scientists, we are paralyzed.
And the internet has democratized truth. That's a huge part of this.
The University of Google, everyone can find an expert who agrees with them. Data is no longer the currency of truth. Narrative is. If you can tell a better story, you win. The Green R vaccines rally was a perfect example. It was political pressure applied to a scientific question. You can't vote on whether a vaccine is safe. Physics and biology don't care about public opinion polls.
This connects so deeply to the theme of our channel, crisis and perception. It's the whole ball game.
It really is. The book illustrates that our perception of risk is completely broken. We fear the visible and the immediate. We fear the plane crash, the pesticide residue, but we ignore the invisible in the long term, the preventable disease, the starvation in Africa, the slow creep of climate change.
Our evolutionary hardware is out of date.
Totally. We evolved to fear the lion in the grass. We didn't evolve to understand statistical probability or molecular biology. Science deals with the invisible. Denialism relies on the visceral. And in a battle between the two, without rigorous education and communication, the visceral wins every time.
And it's not just that people are stupid. I think that's the laziest takeaway you could have.
No, absolutely not. The crisis isn't stupidity. It's that institutions have failed to communicate risk. They have betrayed trust. When the FDA fails to catch Vioxx, the crisis in perception becomes a rational response to an irrational system. Why should you trust them? They have to earn it back, and they aren't doing a great job of it.
So as we wrap up here, let's reflect on the shift Specter describes. We have moved from viewing science as a ladder, something that lifts us out of the mud, to viewing it as a runaway train.
And we need to recognize the cost of that shift. Magical thinking isn't harmless. It comforts the wealthy. We can buy our organic pears and feel safe, but it kills the vulnerable. It leaves the African farmer without crops. It leaves the South African AIDS patient without drugs. It leaves the immunocompromised child in a classroom with measles.
The final thought Specter leaves us with is haunting. Denialism is a virus.
It is contagious, and it doesn't stay in its lane. If you deny the science of vaccines, you are prone to deny the science of climate change or the science of agriculture. You cannot choose which science you like. You can't love your iPhone and your GPS, but reject the scientific method that built them. Science is a method, not a buffet.
That is the provocative question we want to leave you with today. We are standing on the edge of a new era, synthetic biology, genomics, rewriting the code of life. Will we be stopped by the limits of our technology? Or will we be stopped by the limits of our courage to accept reality?
Are we brave enough to trust the evidence, even when it's scary? Or will we retreat into the comfort of a natural fantasy that doesn't exist?
This deep dive was based on Denialism by Michael Specter. If you want to understand the mechanics of the fear shaping our world, go read it.
It's a crucial text for navigating the modern world.
Author, Michael Specter. Book, Denialism. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind crisis and perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon.
For a shorter visual overview of this topic, see the mini explainer linked in the description.
If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for listening.